Unit 4, Activity 3 is all about the manufacturing of fashion, and this is the last activity with any content in this unit. Apparel manufacturing is basically the process where garment design is turned into a marketable piece of clothing, and that is done through being cut, assembled, finished, and then delivered to the retailer. Manufacturing is the largest segment of the fashion industry and operates on the 3 levels that we've talked about before, couture, ready-to-wear, and mass production. So within this industry, there's also 3 levels of apparel manufacturing, which is design, production, and sales. So we're going to be learning about those 3 levels of manufacturing in regards to the 3 different levels of quality. So let's get started. Oops. So those are the basics when a garment is turned into a marketable piece of clothing. So that means that it's made and delivered to the retailer. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and in the last activity we were talking about doing this at home, but this activity is going to be focused in on the industry at a large scale. So did you realize that inventions and technologies of the past have revolutionized the textile industry, and that's changed the production and distribution of clothing and fashion to the consumer? So things are happening at an even faster pace than what happened in the past because of this technology and innovation. So we talked about at the beginning of the unit, new fibers and yarns and fabrics and the ways technology has changed those things. And we looked at the last unit about construction and fabric finishing, like with the serging, which has really revolutionized the industry. So you're going to continue to see how technology has impacted the fashion world in creating garments. One of the things that we want to look at is quality control. And I'm sure that all of you have had a piece of garment or a garment that you've worn that has fallen apart shortly after you've bought it. And quality control is clearly one of the major factors into why that garment didn't last. Manufacturers know that customers will return something that was poorly constructed, and these returns hurt their profit because they would rather the clothes stay home with you, and they don't want to have to give that money back. So they need to look at 3 different phases of quality control. They need to determine whether the quality requirements of the garment in regards to customer expectations. So if you buy something at Forever 21, you're not expecting it to last as long as if you buy something from Lacoste. Manufacturers also need to assess determine how they'll assess the quality of the merchandise. So how they're going to determine whether it's good or bad. And they also need to set goals and measure whether they're meeting them in returns of quality control. So they want to make sure that less than 5% get sent back because of quality control issues. Then they need to keep track of that kind of data. So as a consumer, you definitely have an idea what is quality in terms of a garment, but you might not have the background to look at a shirt or a pair of pants and determine whether it has been produced with quality standards. So let's take a look at that in a little bit more detail. Garment quality is defined as long-term garment performance. So this isn't just how the garment works the first day, the first couple of days that you wear it. It's how it stands up in the long term in relation to appearance, fit, and wear. So does it change shape over time? Does it get like stretched and loose? Does it have holes? Do seams come loose? What happens there? And you can do this on your own by looking at the pieces of the garment. So let's look at levels of quality. So high quality, like couture, use quality fabrics. They're very luxurious. They emphasize construction details, so it is someone that has lots of experience making the garment, and they emphasize extra design features. So everything is luxurious about it, the notions, the thread, the fabric, all of it. So this would be couture. Medium quality is similar to ready to wear. They use reliable construction and fabrics. They incorporate good design. They cost less than high quality garments, but they don't have many extras in terms of embellishments and styling. Lastly, low quality garments are mass market garments, fast fashion garments, and they use okay standards. Think like level 2. They incorporate fair design, there's no extras, and generally this is for fad items that will date quickly and not be worn very often. So they don't have to worry about it wearing out because hopefully people aren't going to wear it that often. You can judge fabric quality by looking at a bunch of different things. You can look at the fabric. Is it even in color? Are there any pulls or snags? Is the weave even? You could look at the elasticity. Does the fabric stretch and then return to its original shape, or does it stretch and then is kind of like uneven after you stretch it? Is it wrinkle resistance? And is it wrinkle resistant, and is it necessary that it's wrinkle resistant? Is there enough fabric? Does it look like they've skimped on it? They could have used more. Are the grains at right angles to each other? We looked at that last time. Are the hemlines hanging evenly? So if you have a skirt, is the hem even all the way around? And the fabric suitability. Did they choose the right fabric for the end use? So you don't want to have a hiking shirt that's made of lace, because lace is not going to stand up when you're doing any form of vigorous activity. So you can look at the fabric and determine whether they've done a good job. You can also look at the workmanship. So you can look at the stitching. Is it even and straight and neat? Is it secure and sturdy? Does it match the color of the fabric, or does it stand out? Are the seams smooth and flat? Do they use an iron? Are there any ripples evident? Are the seam allowances even? Is it double stitched in areas where it should be, like the underarm areas, to make sure that it's going to stay put? Is the zipper long enough? Does it open and close easily? Does it catch? Is there enough fasteners to keep the garment closed, or is there going to be a wardrobe malfunction? And you can also look at the hems, the darts, the collars, and the trim and embellishments. So let's look at the worker. The one thing that everyone has in common, whether they're interested in a career in the fashion industry or not, is that everyone wears clothing, and you have some choice over the clothing that you wear. So fashion is everyone's problem, because everyone participates in fashion in one way or another, whether they're really interested in it or not. So throughout time, the harvesting of fibers, the making of cloth, the construction of garments, all reflect the human experience. That's why this is considered a social science class. You can look at each of these things and how they have impacted humanity since the beginning of time. And this is also contemporary, because the garment industry is a reality for many workers today. In North America, in the past, it was not unordinary for garment workers to work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and take home extra work home to complete during the evenings and weekends, because they needed more money. This is why there were unions formed and different quality controls to put into place to make sure that people weren't being taken advantage of. And we're going to look at one of those incidents here in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. This was a company in New York that employed about 500 young immigrant women, and some were young as 12, so they did employ child labor. The standard shift was 14 hours or longer, and they'd work a 60 to 80 hour work week for $6 to $7 a week. So this story really took a turn for the worst in basically almost around this time in 1911, when a fire broke out on the 8th floor. The factory took up 3 floors of the building that it was on, and floors 8 and 10 were able to evacuate, but floor 9 was not able to for whatever reason. There's a bunch of different ideas as to what happened. One of the theories is that the doors had been locked because they didn't want the employees to take breaks, and so they locked the girls in the room, and then the people that had the keys employees left before they could unlock the 9th floor. This resulted in 148 people dying, and it's hard to believe, but this was the worst workplace disaster until September 11th. The repercussions for the company was that the owners eventually settled in civil suits, and they had to pay $75 for each life lost, and this was in 1913, so a couple years later. So they did have to have some accountability for what happened, but if you think $75 traded for a life, it's still pretty low. And the building became a historical landmark, so if you do ever go to New York, it's still there. The major change from this was that people started unionizing. So they started unionizing and trying to keep each other safe. Another thing that happened with this was that a lot of North American companies ended up moving internationally because the working conditions had to be better. So since the 80s and 90s, a lot of clothing manufacturing has shifted to international destinations because companies can pay less for labor and there's looser safety standards than in Canada, America, or Europe. So enter the sweatshop. So we're going to just make sure we understand what a sweatshop is. And it's defined as when an employer violates one or more labor laws, and these labor laws could govern minimum wage, overtime, child labor, industrial homework, so taking work home, occupational health and safety, or workers' compensation. So there's a lot of different ways that a company could be considered a sweatshop. So there's a lot more out there than you might expect. And you might not know this, but sweatshops do still exist here in North America, but they are just on the down low. So sweatshops originated in the Industrial Revolution, so there was a whole bunch of unskilled laborers who were paid for piecework, so they'd complete something and they get paid per item completed. And a lot of these unskilled workers were female. They were also the rural poor, so maybe farmers that wanted to get out of farming or the crops were bad. And potentially children. Families that were poor would send their children to make money for the family. And one of the unions that came out of sweatshops in the Western world is the ILGWU. It was founded in 1900, and there were violent strikes to improve conditions. And in 1910, there was a strike called the Great Revolt, where 60,000 cloak makers walked off the job. That's a lot of people. And out of these violent strikes, there was union recognition, and this union still exists today, and it started higher wages and basic benefits for workers in these places. So as I mentioned before, there are still sweatshops in North America today. There's been recent studies conducted in the United States, and LA is one of the biggest places where there are sweatshops. So the Department of Labor estimates that 67% of LA garment factories are violating minimum wage and overtime laws, so that would define them as sweatshops. And going across the country, 63% of New York garment factories also violate minimum wage and overtime laws. The thing that scares me the most is that 98% of LA factories have workplace health and safety problems. And a lot of this is considering that many of the people working in these LA garment factories are undocumented workers from south of the border. So we're going to stop there, and we'll have a short video just covering sweatshops in developing countries, because we're going to be talking about this in this unit and next unit as well.